This is Mrs. Palmer-Quay, and there's a few things I want to tell you through this video that'll help you be successful at the Life Science class at Excelsior. Now I'm assuming you have purchased the textbook, so we'll start with preparing your class notebook. I'm recommending a binder with 4 dividers because we're going to have reading notes, and I'm going to spend quite a bit of this video talking about those. There will be some pages of foldables, things that we're going to do in class that'll help you remember stuff for your studying for the test, concepts that we'll be going over. We'll be doing class activities where you'll have a handout, but you don't have to write a report. So there'll be things that'll be labs where you're going to be writing a final report and talking about what we did. And there'll be class activities where there's going to be handouts and there may be things that you're writing, but it won't be exactly the same. Also, this notebook can be personalized, and I strongly encourage that you bring colored pencils and glue sticks and scissors. I'll see what I can get out of the art room, but I know that there are art classes going on the same time that we're having class, so there might not be a lot of stuff available. You also need to sign up for a student account on edmodo.com, and I know that most of you being middle schoolers may not have not using your own email account for school, so this can be your parent, but you do need to sign up under the student category, not a parent category, because the student gets different stuff from the teacher than the parent. And I'm going to be able to give you a join code. If I see you, we'll give it to you in person, otherwise I'll email it to you so that you can put that in when you sign up for Edmodo, and it'll send you right to the page for Life Science. And then as you are doing your reading, I want to recommend that you use the Cornell Notes system. And basically the Cornell Notes system has you write your own study questions. And it involves a process where you first record some information, you review that information, you recite it, actually say it, and all this is to help you remember better at the other end. You will be taking The first thing in using the Cornell Note system is to set up your note paper where you're taking your notes in the recommended way. And there, in a Cornell Note system, there's a space at the top to write what chapter you're in. There's a big fat column on the right where you're taking most of your notes. There's a smaller column on the left where you're going to write those study questions. And at the very end of the last page of the chapter notes, would be a place for you to write a summary, but on most of your notes you're not going to have this summary part until you're at the end. So your page will just basically have those 2 columns there, a big fat column on the right and a skinny column on the left. So as you are reading, you want to start recording, and that means working in this big column on the right. You want to look for big ideas in the text and write those big ideas at the beginning and then put the details underneath in lists or bullets. And bullets, I've got some little bullets over here. It's just basically a way of setting up different lists at different levels. So for every new idea, you make a new paragraph. Leave yourself some space in between these paragraphs in your notes. If there are any drawings or diagrams in your textbook, you can reproduce those right on your note page. So here's an example from our first chapter. This is right out of the Life Science books. I've written chapter 1 across the top, and because this book uses sections, I also have included what section I am in. So I'm section 1.1 and then 1.2, just for a way of keeping track of where my notes are. So as I was reading through those chapters, or those paragraphs, in this chapter, these were the important ideas I thought. That biology was the study of life, and look, I use an equal sign. Abbreviations are really helpful when you're doing this. Biologists are the scientists. Again, I'm using an equal sign. Living things are organisms. So this is some vocabulary here written out as just a phrase, not even a sentence. Then the next big idea is that there's many different specialties in biology, and I listed a few that were given in the book. This probably is not real important information. And then this sort of an ending paragraph talked about how studying life science helps us understand the world, that organisms interact, we stay in balance with each other. And then in the next section, we're starting to talk about the scientific method. So again, I give a definition. It equals the steps for collecting information and evaluating and reporting that information. And then I start listing the steps. It begins with a question and then observation, and I just didn't do any more at this point. So this would be the kind of stuff that you would do in setting up the first part of recording your notes. Then after you've recorded, you review your notes. And that basically makes sure you understand what you wrote. go back through and underline or highlight the really important stuff. So things that are bolded in the book, and all of your vocabulary words for one will be bolded, or any ideas that just keep on coming back, well, those are clues that this is really important stuff and you might want to make sure that you note it in your own notes. Also, as we go on in the course, look for connections and maybe make a little side note to yourself. This is connected back to something we studied last week or last month. So here is I've reviewed these notes and I've done two things. I've done underlining over here and an underlining over here. My definitions for scientific method and biology being the study of life, because these are all things that are kind of like the really big ideas in these first two paragraphs. One thing I forgot to mention before, here's another little abbreviation that I use. This sentence would be read, stay in balance with one another. Just this W/ is an abbreviation I've used since college as a way to write the word with and sort of save time. So then the next step is to write your own study questions. Instead of using the ones in the back of the book, come up with ones on your own. And those are what are going to happen in this small column over here on the left. You can write full questions or just prompts, which means one word or two words that make you think of answering. It's just the right kind of word that makes you it stands in for a question. And these questions need to be ones that are answered by your notes primarily. It's okay to write a few questions that need further research, things you want to ask me when we come to class, or you want to go do some internet research on your own. But most of this is designed to help you study the textbook and study your own notes. So focus on writing questions that are answered by the notes. So here are some questions. Again, we've gone through, these are the same notes we've been looking at. So what kind of questions can I ask? Well, this first part's talking all about biology, so I could ask the study question, what is biology? Or I could ask myself to name one biology specialist, one of these specific, more specialized parts of biology that are mentioned in the textbook. And then in this second big section, we were talking about the scientific method. So a simple question would be, what is the scientific method? And then what is the first step? What is the second step? What is the third step? Those are all legitimate study questions. Then you recite, and this means answer your own study questions without peeking. So you need to cover the notes with a piece of paper so that you can't see what they are. Read your questions and answer out loud. We're recommending out loud because when you just think the answer, it's very easy to get distracted. But if you're listening to yourself talk, you're much more able to stay focused. You can also take this blank piece of paper and write your answers out on it, but you don't have to. You can just say it out loud, and it still will be effective in helping you study. So here we've covered our right side of the page, and you'd be quizzing yourself. What is biology? Oh, biology is the study of life. Name one biology specialist. Let's see, zoologist. That's somebody who studies animals. What is the scientific method? Well, that's that thing of how you find information about something and evaluate the information. Obviously, I need to look at my notes again because that was a pretty lousy definition. So this is what you do to recite. Here are some tips. If you can't think of a question, look at the textbook study questions. I'm not making you answer those textbook study questions. I want you to write your own, but you can use them for ideas because, of course, the person writing the chapter thought those were pretty important questions. Make sure you include all the new vocabulary words, and I'm using the word new here. If you already know what the word is, you don't have to write it in your notes, but if it's something that's new to you, make sure you include it, and the text very nicely puts them all in bold. The textbook also has this section called Key Chapter Points that you find right at the end of the chapter. And so you can look to see, have you covered all those same points in your notes? If you've missed one of them, you might want to go back and make sure it's included. Because again, the author has put it in the chapter. They must think it's important information. You probably should know it. After you've done all of that, then you do finally get to do the summary and something extra that I've added called a 3-2-1. This is not part of Cornell notes, this is part of my notes. So a summary comes at the end of the chapter, and you would be asking yourself, how would I explain this to someone else? All this stuff I've been reading, the stuff I've been practicing, this is after you have developed your questions, you really know the material at this point. So how would you explain it to somebody else? But remember, it is a summary, not a rewriting of the whole chapter. You want to be short and brief, only the most important things. And then what's a 3-2-1? Well, it's 3 things you've learned, 2 things that were surprising, and 1 question. Oops, I have 1 questions. Please excuse my double S there. 1 question that you still have on the material. So this is another way to think about your notes. It's a way to go beyond the textbook, beyond just summarizing it, but just to write down to you 3 things that were interesting you learned, 2 things that were surprising, and 1 question you still have. Make sure you bring your notebook and your 3-2-1 for class because we will be using them. I think this gives you a good overview of some of the important things you need to do before I see you in the first class. If you have any questions, you can always get a hold of me. Ask and I will answer. See you in class.